Hello and welcome to this session where we're going to be looking at patterns of enterprise, and in particular we're going to be concentrating on two countries, Botswana and Moldova. So this session is focusing on the following outcome. So by the end of the session you will have explored the patterns of enterprise and entrepreneurship in two countries, Botswana and Moldova. So let's look at these two countries now. But before we do, let's just check that we know where in the world that we're talking about. So on the left-hand side there, you can see Moldova is firmly placed in between Romania and Ukraine. And Botswana there is just north of South Africa to the right of your screen. So both countries have similarities to each other, but they also have some contrasting details as well within their business environments. So for example, around 30% of both countries live below the poverty line. Growth rates are reasonably similar as well, with Botswana showing a growth rate of 4.5% and Moldova a growth rate of 6%. However, look at the income per capita there, the second row in. Moldova has a capita income of $2,200. Botswana, though, has a capita income of $14,500. Why the difference? Why should Botswana be, in theory, so much richer than Moldova? Well, we have to be a bit careful here because Botswana's economy is built on its diamonds. And this means that there are an incredibly number of poor people, but also a minority of incredibly rich people. So to a certain extent, those figures are skewed. And look at the different contrasting environments for enterprises. So for example, in Moldova, 95% of people are employed. In Botswana, the figure drops to 29%. There's also a difference in the number of firms exporting. 25%, just about a quarter of firms in Moldova, export. As Botswana, the number is substantially lower. Firms using their own websites as well also differs widely. Half of Moldovan businesses have their own website, where again, Botswana the figure is substantially lower. Look at the major constraints on businesses as well. The tax administration, for example, is substantially higher in Moldova than Botswana. The level of corruption is roughly about the same. But look at the rates for crime, theft and disorder, substantially higher in Botswana than Moldova. All these factors can influence the success of enterprise development. So let's look at these two countries in a little bit more depth. Let's start with Botswana. So in terms of enterprise, well, the economy is strongly diamond dependent, as we've just said, and the government is seeking to diversify by strengthening its small business sector. Basically, it realises that diamonds are natural resources and eventually are a finite source of income. Firms in general, though, remain small and they focus on local markets, strongly restricted by the ability of SMEs to adopt e-commerce. Environmental uncertainty and shortage of finance and high skill levels are all problematic. SME development is seen as a priority but remains a very, very large informal sector. In other words, these are organisations or small enterprises that exist outside of the economic mainstream in terms of paying taxes, etc. So, for example, from some research, on the matter of finance, Magawi et al. In 2002 studied 10 citizen-owned construction companies' access to finance. They drew the conclusion that firms found it incredibly difficult to access finance and had to adopt other competitive strategies. And you can see there the implications for growth, for example. Rotala and Brackle in 2007 used focus group and company interviews to explore firms' ICT expertise. Their study suggests generally low levels of skills, particularly high-level skills. Hence, if IT skills challenges are not addressed urgently, Botswana could lose its economic advantages to the connected world because of migrating IT specialists, a small IT workforce, or the low ratio of ICT graduates. Both of these studies suggest that resource-constrained nature of SMMEs in Botswana and their difficulties in investing and entering external markets is problematic. Both factors are likely to be constraining contributors to growth and innovation, which, as we've seen before, are absolutely crucial to local economies as well as national economies. So to summarise the situation in Botswana, we can say that the SME sector is at least providing jobs. We can also say that it's a basis for social cohesion. However, the jury is very much still out on deciding whether the SME sector can contribute as a source of economic growth and as a source of new innovation. So let's contrast Moldova. Their economy was and remains largely agricultural, and it's marked by a legacy of the process of transition. Collective farms have been dismantled, and there's been land reform of the 1990s, and effects of these are still felt today. Industrial activity is also dominated by a command economy, creating non-standard norms and objectives. Firms have very, very little incentive to seek to be competitive. Unemployment is really quite low, but that's only because 25% of the workforce are working abroad. In 2002, some 244,000 people were officially declared as working or looking for work. Unofficial estimates put the level of unemployment and outmigration as much, much higher, with the latter biased towards the better educated and young cohorts of the population. Exactly the sort of people that are normally responsible for innovation and growth. So what about its enterprise landscape? Well, as we've said, agribusiness dominates. Although the industry is fragmented, productivity remains low with significant levels of unregistered transactions, i.e. the black market. Development has also been very uneven with significant growth in the capital, but much less development in rural and agricultural areas. However, overall, entrepreneurial activity is very poor. Exports, although reasonably significant, they remain largely agriculturally low-value products. Milk, other dairy products and cheese are sent largely to Russia. Exports to Western Europe have been limited, though, due to their inability to meet food safety and hygiene standards, lack of marketing experience, and high tariff and other trade barriers. So let's take a look now at a mini case study on Moldova with mulled wine. You can find this case study in your Topic 2 folder. You should take a look if you're really interested. It's a typical case study story. Mulled wine was established in the 1950s as a grape collecting and processing centre, and it employed 33 staff. In 1999, privatisation happened, and the pre-privatisation director bought up shares and built up his ownership stake. This is an action research case study focused on issues around marketing, technology and procurement. Gorton et al. Found several key issues. First of all, they found a poor technological base within the plant. Absolutely no marketing or promotional plan was in evidence, and there was no clear strategy for procurement or development. Again, you can read more about this on Learn. I want you to pause now, and if you've already read the case study, great. You can continue with the question. If you haven't, make sure you read the case study before you continue. The question is, what would your plan for mulled wine look like? After you finish reflecting on this, you can continue. So let's try and summarise the situation in Moldova. Just like in Botswana, enterprise could be responsible for providing jobs. Unlike Botswana, though, it's also a source of economic growth. However, in Moldova, enterprise is not a source of new innovation, and neither is it a source of social cohesion. So why don't we reflect a little bit at this point on what these two countries can offer us in terms of knowledge? Well, It's very clear that the wider business and economic environments shape the way in which the small and medium enterprise sector contributes towards economies. This point, of course, is not just relevant to Botswana and Moldova. Every country has its own business and economic environments that impact enterprise activity. The literature reviewed earlier was developed mainly based on the US and European experience, and as such may not be applicable in all contexts and geographical locations. Things will change, of course. Botswana is currently developing its ICT strategy, which may help to develop richer ICT skills, depending, of course, whether the country can stop migration. Moldova is also moving towards EU membership, and eventually it will get it. This will reduce trade barriers and boost its economy.